Welcome to the Heal and Transform podcast with your host, Andrew Ramsden. Andrew finds top experts to pick their brains about what coaches, therapists, and other complementary practitioners can do to level up and amplify the work so we can heal and transform the world together.
G'day everyone, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me. So excited to have Chandell Labbozzetta joining us this evening because Chandell is a sales superstar and she started at the tender age of only 14. At that time, she was a sales leader with Nutramedics, and over the last 20 years, she's built her career working in large organizations like KPMG and Regis, but also building up businesses in the franchising sector and in events management. She's also built her own successful business, Life Puzzle. Now, through Life Puzzle, Chandell helps business owners fire their Itty Bitty Shitty Committee. We're going to find out what that's all about on this evening's show, and to become the confident salespeople that they should be so that they can serve more and have a greater positive impact in the world. I know you're going to enjoy it.
Yes.
Hello.
Chandell.
Thank you so
Welcome.
much for having me. It's wonderful to be here. And yes, we will be talking about that Itty Bitty Shitty Committee and how we can fire them. So I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Andrew.
It's no worries at all. Now, Chandell, you've helped countless business owners to become confident with sales and improve their sales technique, myself included. Now, I enrolled in your Selling from Stage program a few years ago now, and I remember it having a really profound impact for me. And it really opened my mind and opened my eyes to all the possibilities that practitioners could provide. So it was really my first exposure to NLP techniques. And I've had a lot more exposure since then, but at the time it was quite shocking to me, which we may or may not get into depending on where the conversation goes. What is it that you love the most about what you do?
Look, Andrea, as you know, and for our listeners, my purpose is about inspiring confidence in others so that they can make empowered decisions. And so for me, I see a lot of people that are really stuck in this idea that, you know, they're looking at other people and they're going, I want to be like that, or I should be doing this. And so what often happens is that concept of judging up. I could never be that. How could I ever get there? And that leads to a feeling of basically feeling like we can't do it. And that to me is unbelievably disheartening when I realize that there are so many people in the world and everybody has their own talents and their own things that they can bring. It's a matter of unleashing that and firing that Itty Bitty Shitty Committee, which is the group of people that sit on the shoulder and tell us why we can't have what we want. And so for me, my work is really about bringing the essence of brilliance out of people and building their confidence around that, and then being able to communicate it in a way that they can lead passion profit businesses, really. So, you know, so many people in this field get into it because they've got a passion or they've got a desire to help or to add value. And often they get caught up in, well, how do I actually translate that into something that then also fuels my lifestyle, as well as, you know, delivering on those heart-centered values about giving back to the things and the causes that we're passionate about. So that's what really drives me and gets me up out of bed in the morning. That and the concept of intergenerational mental health, which is if we are happier individuals, then that has a flow-on effect in terms of how we interact with others, and the domino effect of other people experiencing that joy ultimately leads to people interacting in a really positive way and creating a better planet, basically.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, absolutely. As you know, I'm very passionate about this idea that coaches, therapists, and healers, we can heal and transform the world. And I love that you start with the business and helping them transition from being very heart-centered, being people who love to help people, and help them transition then into also being able to sell confidently and make a good living that they deserve so that they can then reach more people. And as a result, makes that bigger positive impact on their lives and their families and all the people that they help and treat as well. It's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I know for a lot of people, and over the years, as you know, I'm a master trainer of NLP. I was the first to be certified by the school that trained me in 2017, so first in Australia. And, you know, through that process of that journey, I coached a lot of other practitioners and trainers that were coming through, in some cases mentored them. And one of the things that I see time and time again in any modality is that generally people are in that field because they've had some kind of experience. And so, they feel called to actually help and serve in the way that they actually had their own lives transformed, if you like. And one of the challenges with that is that sometimes they get the itty bitty shitty committee about, well, how do I monetize this without feeling icky and sleazy? I mean, really, this is about giving back. It's about serving people. And unfortunately, that usually translates into them becoming servants rather than actually serving. And, the way that I like to describe that is if you imagine somebody on their knees with their hands out placating, people in the way of becoming servants, they actually end up putting themselves less than their prospective clients or their clients, rather than seeing themselves as an equal who is on the journey as a tour guide to help that person facilitate change. So it's about shifting that mindset that it can be a passion profit business, meaning that it's okay to be compensated for something that you are delivering of huge value.
That's okay to realize your worth, right? I guess if you're in that state of pleading,
yes,
you're not going to get respect, and therefore you're not going to get sales. People aren't going to want to work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the whole process, for a lot of people, the word sales has this negative connotation about it. And so I am a big believer that sales is simply the art of influence. And so if you think about the way that, and particularly talking to our heart-centered practitioners, whatever modality you might be in, that change of, you had a problem, you started with some kind of block or some kind of issue, and then, someone showed you the way, and then you moved into, a place where you had some new tools and you were able to make that transition on that journey. Yet, for a lot of people, they don't see the influencing of that story. And so sales is the art of influence. It's simply the process of being able to influence somebody in being able to see it from a new point of view. And so we want to, take away all of those horrible connotations that, have evolved out of the sales word and the bad experiences that people have had around sales practice.
So this is essentially part of what the Itty Bitty Shitty Committee is, right? That's quite a mouthful. It's all of those limiting beliefs that you might have about sales and what that means and feeling yucky about that. But it's also the self-critical voice, isn't it, that says you're not good enough, or you can't really do this, or who are you to tell other people how to live their lives, or what to do, what to think, etc. Is that fair? What is this Itty Bitty Shitty Committee to you?
Yeah, so the way I see the Itty Bitty Shitty Committee show up in my clients, and certainly how it showed up for me many years ago, before I found a lot of these tools, was, this inner voice where some people describe it as the imposter syndrome. So on the outside, they're gliding along and they look like they've got it all together, but the internal dialogue is, oh my God, I'm going to fail, or oh my God, I'm never going to get this right, or what if I get found out? For some people, it's, well, how could I possibly charge what, such and such is charging because I haven't got enough experience, or, I'm just starting out as a practitioner. How could I possibly engage somebody for a fee when I haven't had any practice? All of those sorts of things are versions of the Itty Bitty Shitty Committee. Or maybe, it's got to do with the history. Maybe you put yourself outside the comfort zone one time and someone shot you down. So you have a past limiting belief that, when you put yourself out there, you get shut down. And so, where we are in Australia, and I know that there's probably listeners from outside of Australia here, that where we are in Australia, we call it the tall poppy syndrome. In the US, I've commonly heard it referred to as the crab in the bucket syndrome, and it's really like, we have some beliefs that come out of our Itty Bitty Shitty Committee which don't really make sense. Like, for example, some people are afraid of failing, which kind of makes sense to a lot of people, but there are some people that are afraid of succeeding as well, because with success comes sometimes judgment and attention that we don't want. So, the first step of kind of dealing with our Itty Bitty Shitty Committee is to get conscious of, what are the beliefs that you hold, and are they actually serving you in terms of the goals and the things that you want to create. So that's really the first thing, getting conscious and realizing that, often they're not real. They're linked to some kind of experience that's been negative, or something that has held us back that we've manifested as being a true belief for us, which may not actually be true.
Yeah, fantastic. So I can only assume that coaches, therapists, and healers, who are the primary audience for this show in particular, understand that whole background of where these sorts of limiting beliefs start. I mean, obviously there's Gestalt theory, and NLP talks about this a lot. This was all new to me when I was doing this work with you.
Yes.
And in fact, I just wasn't aware of the little voices in my head that were so self-critical and those self-limiting beliefs. I had to discover that through our process of you coaching me. And it really is this amazing depth. I mean, one of the ones that I had, which I think is just wild, is a fear of success, as you say. But the fear of success was this: what if I build this amazing, successful business and then I feel trapped by it? It's more than I can handle. I'm now out of control because I'm a slave to this monster that I've created.
Yes.
Which I now think is completely ridiculous, because if I create it and I don't love it, then I just change it, right? I created it, I can create something else. So what's interesting to me is, even when you're consciously aware and you can make that switch and say, this is ridiculous, I'm going to believe something else, it's not as easy as trying to shift it down here. It can sometimes still get stuck down there and you still feel it. There's that disconnect between head and the rest of the body.
Yeah. And gut, etc. Head, heart, and gut. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, there's a difference between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. And, for many of our practitioners that do work in that space, you're familiar with the principles of both. But we may have some listeners who haven't, dived deep. So, the surface information around that, in the way that I like to describe it to people who are not familiar, is that your conscious mind is really logical, rational, reasonable. It enjoys facts. It usually follows process, and it needs time in order, to actualize things. And we often call it the goal setter, and we live 10% of our lives there. Then we have the unconscious mind, which is sometimes irrational. It's emotional. It's the domain of all of our memories. All our behaviors are programmed from here. And generally, it doesn't understand time. And this is a really cool thing. How you sometimes daydream and the time passes and you look up at the clock and you go, oh wow, I thought that was like half an hour and it was only 3 minutes. Or on the flip side of that, you thought it might have only been 3 minutes, but suddenly an hour's passed. And so when we're engaged in that unconscious mind at the depths of the unconscious programming, we're often we don't need time as such. It doesn't understand time. Things at the unconscious level can be instant. And so, a lot of people we live 90% of our lives unconsciously because of all of our behaviors. And so I often say to people that the conscious mind is where willpower changes happen. So if you've got strong will and you're determined and focused and devoted to your activities long enough to form a habit, then you've used your willpower to make change, and that change over rhythmic patterns has embedded itself at the unconscious level. For some people, they have emotional triggers, so they might start really well and then all of a sudden something triggers them and they go back to unconscious processing. And so when we've got the itty bitty shitty committee, when we've got these unwarranted beliefs, these things that don't serve us, and we make changes at the unconscious level, we can actually rewire and reprogram what's happening about the belief. And that change can take place not just in the mind, but also viscerally in the body as well. Like the client can feel the change and have a transformation in every single cell of their body.
Love that. Yeah, it's powerful stuff, isn't it? And is this something we can do by ourselves, or is it something you really need to work with a coach to help them, or they help us facilitate it?
Look, I think there's elements of therapy that people can self-treat. There are certainly, some techniques in NLP, even some in timeline therapy, that the practitioners have claimed that they've been successful in being able to do some techniques themselves. And then there are some people that, prefer to be able to just surrender to the unconscious mind and really allow themselves to be embodied in that process while their tour guide or their coach practitioner actually takes them on that guided journey. I think for me personally, over the years, there's been, a little bit of both. There have been some times when I'm aware that my conscious mind is extremely active. And so I have appreciated the ability to just surrender as the client and actually, go through that process with a guide. And I think, that's a really important point in terms of, when is a client a client? And this is one of the common pitfalls that a lot of mistakes are made by practitioners there as well. So.
So this is essentially how we fire the Itty Bitty Shitty Committee, right? We go through this process of discovering and becoming aware of what those limiting beliefs are and where they sit in the body, in the unconscious, and then going through those guided practices with a coach.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I'm a big advocate of having a coach. I actually have 3 coaches in different areas. And so one of the things that's really important to me is integrity. And so I think that if I'm asking people to invest money in me as a coach, then, I should eat my own cooking, so to speak, or, practice what I preach or walk my walk, however you want to say it. It all means the same thing. And so for me, I see a lot of value in investing in somebody to help me with these practices in the same way that I help other people as well. Because you see, and this is a common phrase that someone in our community uses all the time. If you're a golfer, you can't see your own swing while you're actually swinging the golf club. You need for somebody to actually, look at your form. And, there are some practices in firing the Itty Bitty Shitty Committee where you start believing your own BS. So sometimes you need an unreasonable friend on the outside telling you what you need to do and helping you to facilitate that change.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of this process that when I try to do it myself, I get very much stuck in my head as I tend to do. So I really appreciate having a coach to hold my hand. I also find it a lot easier to apply a lot of the thinking and the strategy and have that visibility when I'm working with clients than when I'm working on my own stuff.
Yes.
When I'm working on my own stuff, as you say, you can't see the swing. You're too deep in it.
Yeah.
You need that helicopter view.
Yeah.
Somebody else to help out. Yeah, it's very cool. So we're going to talk about some of the big mistakes that practitioners make when it comes to sales. And there's sort of countless places we could start with this. But what would you say is the biggest mistake that practitioners make?
Well, look, I think we sort of covered off on one of them already, which is the idea of, shifting from serving to servant. That's one of the biggest challenges that I see that needs to be overcome for heart-centered practitioners, because they start with this idea in their mind that they actually really want to facilitate change. They want to make a difference. And, that intention is coming from the heart a lot of the time. And so, the goal is to make that change as opposed to look at any of the entrepreneurial stuff. What do you mean ask for money? What do you mean run a business? What do you mean, putting that in practice as far as clients is concerned? I just want to help people is often the thing that I hear people say. And I absolutely want you to help them. I want you to hear me when I say I absolutely want you to help them, and I want you to be compensated for what you're worth. Now, the first thing that you need to change in your mindset is that you invested very good money to get trained in your modality. Not only have you invested very good money to get trained in your modality, you've also invested very precious time. You've invested precious time in your study, in your ability to, go to the classes that you've gone through, to, be certified, to go through examinations or to be what's the word I'm looking for, supervised in the process of your attainment of your certification. The problem with that is that that's not the whole piece of the pie. Once you've got your certification, one of the biggest mistakes that I see practitioners make is they think that their certificates, like the ones that are in the background here, are the vehicle to them now having clients. And so I see people walk out of a training with their certificate in hand and they're totally proud of it, which you should be, and then they sort of hire a room somewhere and they expect the clients just to show up. That's one of the biggest mistakes that they make. And then because they haven't got a steady flow of clients coming in just because they've got their certification and the fact that they've got a place to see their clients, they start to think, well, maybe it's because other people don't understand the value of what I do. And that's true. The prospects of the people that you want to help, they don't understand what you do. And this is the second biggest mistake that I see heart-centered practitioners make and healers. I see them make the mistake of demonstrating instead of communicating. And so that looks a little bit like this. Someone is trained in hypnotherapy and someone says, oh, I hear you're a hypnotherapist. Can that help with helping me lose weight? And then what happens is the person says, yes, absolutely. Why don't you come into my clinic and I'll do a free session for you and you can see how it works. The problem with that is that you've just demonstrated to the person that you're talking to that you don't value what you're doing and you're somewhat not trusting in the fact that you can get that person a result. When people don't invest in what they're doing, then they generally don't value it as much. So, for example, the metaphor that I like to share, or the analogy I like to share, is if somebody gifts you something, then you don't hold it as precious. Like, let's say they gift you something really expensive. The mindset on how precious it is changes than if you had to save up to buy that thing yourself. And I think that a lot of the time when people are so eager to have clients, they don't think about the psychological implication that they are giving to their prospective client when they invite them in for free therapy or free sessions. So the way that we cut through this is we learn about pacing people to the outcome. We learn about the way that we talk about what we do from a problem solution outcome perspective, and we guide them to come and make an investment in getting that result. And that has multiple effects on multiple levels, where we no longer have conversations driven by price. We're having conversations driven by value and impact that it's going to make for the person. And the simple example that I'll share is that probably many of the listeners aren't familiar with how I got my transition into this field. It's been 16 years that we've been in this business. And 16 years ago, I was in corporate, and I had a really intensive health challenge myself around my own Itty Bitty Shitty Committee. I fell into a deep depression, and I had some plans around not wanting to be here anymore. And so my transition into this field was based on the fact that my mum, Teresa, who passed away last year in April, she actually wanted to get into therapy and hypnotherapy, and I was in a place in my life where she wanted to take me with her because she was worried about leaving me on my own at the time. And so I sat in on a hypnotherapy class, and a mentor of mine had told me about NLP. And subsequently, we went to go and do a training. And after investing nearly $25,000 in therapy that had not yielded me a result, and I want to be really clear and say that I believe there's a lot of amazing practitioners out there that do wonderful things. I just hadn't found that person. After nearly $25,000 over 11 months of therapy, I'd not got a result. And yet in the process of getting my practitioner certification, I was able to fire the Itty Bitty Shitty Committee on my self-worth issues that were leading me to that really dark place. And I can confidently tell you that, all these years later, I've not had any relapses to the depth of that despair. And so I really believe in what I do with clients, not just because of the transformations that I've seen in clients, but because of my own experience and my own journey with it. And so, that's my next tip for the practitioners out there, the therapists, the healers. Your journey is an important one to share in terms of your own transformation. So rather than trying to demonstrate to people without them having an understanding, share the information around transformation of yourself and also your clients' success stories.
That's really cool, because everyone's got this story. All the practitioners I talk to have got maybe not a similar story, but a little bit different in how they came on this journey themselves.
Yeah.
Everyone's got their origin story. It's like a superhero movie.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost like a pillar, so that's a pillar in terms of expressing your passion, in terms of helping people connect with what it might mean for them. Often I see people, I guess the next thing that I'll share is that I see people, trying to put Band-Aids on ailments that people don't know they have, I think a lot of heart-centered practitioners, healers, they enter into the delivery cycle before they actually have a client. And the analogy that I use for that often is that if I come up to you, Andrew, and I hand you a Band-Aid, I'm being really generous and I'm giving you something that I think you need that's going to help you. But you're looking at it and you're just going about your day and you're like, okay, Chandell, that's nice. Thanks for the Band-Aid. But really what we need to do is we need to highlight, or if I was going to be clever about delivering that value to you and what I was really thinking about it, I would be able to point out to you and say, hey, Andrew, you've got a paper cut on your finger and you've got a lovely white t-shirt on today. I want to make sure that your shirt stays white and you don't get any germs in your cut. Here's a Band-Aid, cover it up until, you can put some disinfectant on it or whatever it is that you're going to do to seal it. And then we're clear on why I'm offering you a solution. Whereas I see, practitioners and healers running up to people and say, let me do some kinesiology and muscle testing on you. I think you've got a blockage, or come here and let me do some hypnosis on you because it's going to help you with all those things that you need to get out of the way to be empowered. Let me help you fire the Itty Bitty Shitty Committee that you didn't even know you had yet. We have to nurture people through that process, and they won't see value in investing in themselves if they can't contrast the problem from the solution.
Yeah, I've definitely felt that shift. As soon as I start delivering and offering value for free, there's a shift. Mm-hmm. The prospect really doesn't value what it is that I do at that point.
Yeah.
So it's almost like an interesting energy around successful sales. There's a tension or an energy in the air. You've got to remember so many different mindsets, and I'll rattle off a couple of them, which you may or may not agree with, but lots of different things that I've heard. And it's like you say, there's that idea that you don't want to be a servant, and yet you also don't want to focus on sales necessarily. You want to make it more about a service mindset, but you don't want to serve them too early. You don't want to start delivering before you sell, and you don't want to chase. And you also want to be in the buyer's frame. I don't know if people have heard of this one, but it's this idea that as the seller, you don't want to be the seller necessarily. You want to be the buyer. You want to be the one making sure there's a good fit and a good alignment there with your client, because it goes two ways. So there's all these different things to be aware of. Sometimes it's really challenging to try to hold all of that. What would be your advice for people that are getting comfortable and getting used to that energy and those mindsets?
Yeah, and look, this is something that I know you help people with a lot, right? And you and I have had this conversation before around having rhythms and systems around things, and actually having that process that they follow. And so, first thing I'd get them to do is talk to you, and also to get clear on how your journey looks for someone. And then if you have rhythm around it, then it becomes a process of just following the rhythm. So what do I mean by that for some people who are unfamiliar? As people are interested in doing something, there's a journey that they go on. So, with the 4 stages to learning, we talk about conscious incompetence, where people don't know what they don't know. So then they suddenly become aware, but they don't really know how it works. And so, that's moving to, the unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence, where they don't know, but they know, but they don't really know. And then you've got your conscious competence, where they start to actually really understand it, but they have to focus on it. And then, of course, leading to a place where it just becomes second nature, which is unconsciously competent. And so, from that nature, if you think about those stages to learning, the way that a prospect learns about you and how you can help follows a really similar process. And so there's different touch points along the way. And we actually teach this in the 13-week Profitable Business Accelerator that we do, where we look at, how do you attract people, and what are you saying to them to pique their interest and to qualify them as being a potential client. And this is something that I learned really early on in my coaching career from my mentors. And they said that you don't want clients, you want clients who get results. And as you know, because everyone always has free will, we can't force our clients to make any change that they don't want to make. And so they must be invested in the process, and they won't be invested in the process if they don't understand it. And so we need to nurture them through that understanding without actually having to do the modality or the techniques or the coaching before they've actually invested in being part of the process. So, your journey, your client journey, the way that people get into that sales funnel, if you like, for lack of better terminology, is that we don't want to give away the farm before, we've actually got their agreement that they want to play. And so their agreement that they want to play usually comes in the form of some kind of signature of consent, and ultimately that they're making an investment in themselves and by default in you to guide them through that process. So, you actually want to have a set of touch points. And actually, Andrew, you might be able to, check in with with me on this. I think Google did a study where they actually realized that in order for people to make their buying decisions, because there's so much choice, you actually have to build up 7 hours of interaction with, was it 13 touch points over 4 different platforms, I think.
I know Glenn Carlson used to teach us something similar. Yeah, there's 7 hours over 11
touches and 4 platforms. Yeah. So my numbers may not be right, but it's around that. And I think that, you know, in the 13-week program that we deliver, we talk about Seth Godin's coffee to marriage principle. And, you know, that principle, if you've not heard it before, Seth says, you know, you wouldn't go and meet somebody in a bar the first time you met them and propose marriage. You know, it's just, people would think you're a bit crazy. So, you know, there's a process when you meet someone you want to be in a relationship with and you want to get married and all of that. That, you know, you date for a while, you meet the parents, you know, there's all these different touch points along the way. And then, you know, you come to an agreement, yep, this is an investment I'm wanting to make. And so if we map across that idea to, you know, your sales process for your modalities and your coaching and your healing, most people are hopefully going to be making an investment with you of at least a couple of $1,000s over their journey with you. And in the process of doing that, you don't walk up to somebody that you just met at a networking event or, you know, at a mixer or a meetup or something and say, hey, you know, come and spend $5,000 on me right now because I can help you to be empowered. You know, you want to have a clear understanding of what their problems are. You want to build up that need. You want to have them understand the value proposition of that. And that requires touch points along the way. And so, you know, clearly we need to define them first, and then we need to follow that rhythm and do that consistently so we can see what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, lovely. So there's a real ecosystem there. And in 2020, we're talking about online content marketing and social media being some of the most leveraged ways, putting content out there, articles, posts, videos, etc., where we can bring people on that journey. Is that fair?
100%. And that's exactly the right terminology and why I said that they can really talk to you and get some help with that, because, you know, you've got some great practices that I know you use with your clients around helping them to, you know, really utilize and build that ecosystem as well from a digital and you know, technology perspective as well. So, you know, I always recommend to people when they're starting out to, you know, use a combination of automated as well as touch points, because then they can get to know what's working and actually find the rhythm. And certainly, you know, moving to a stage where there are some points of that can be automated so you can focus on what you love to do, which is, you know, be the practitioner, be the technician.
Yeah, beautiful. So a combination, as you say, of the automated stuff, which could be videos or content, and then, or it could be a gift, or it could be a masterclass, where they're actually getting that face-to-face connection with you a little bit more. Yep. Or it could be a one-on-one strategy session, which often will double as your sales conversation, right? The sales script. That's often how businesses set this up. Yeah. I don't know if you tend to do it that way, but that way you're not actually giving away the farm during that strategy session. It's more that pre-framing of, yes, do you want to make a commitment to yourself and to work together?
Yeah, absolutely. And usually it would have steps in that process around the ecosystem. You know, there might be an intro step where they can come in. You know, what comes to mind for me, many years ago, we were teaching confident closing, which was a sales workshop around the psychology of selling and the 20% strategy that goes with it. So 80% strategy, 80% psychology, 20% strategy. And, you know, we were talking to a lady there. She was a kinesiologist and, you know, completely focused on her mission to transform people with their health. And, you know, what was really interesting is that she used to go straight into a session and deliver her services without any agreement from the client that they would pay. And obviously, if for anyone who knows kinesiology, you really need buy-in from the client in order to participate. And she was really disheartened, thinking that she wasn't good enough because people were refusing to compensate her for sessions, even though she made no agreement with them that they were going to pay. She would demonstrate and then expect them to be so transformed that they would pay her. And, you know, obviously that led to a lot of challenges in her business, and she was in quite dire straits when she came along to this workshop. And the simple process of offering like an information evening for people where they came along and, for 30 minutes to an hour each month, she would have a little mini intro workshop where people could come in. She would do one demonstration for everybody, as in like she would have somebody as a demo subject to demonstrate the process. She'd educate people a little bit about how kinesiology could help them with various different ailments. And then she would invite people to come in for an introductory session, which was for a small investment. And then if they were happy with that, then they would make an investment into her bigger package. And so that would be an example of what we were talking about before with your ecosystem, and also with the Seth Godin principle of coffee to marriage. And it's sort of nurturing people along the way. You don't just go and vomit all your products and services onto them when you first meet them. It's very overwhelming for someone who doesn't know you're coming. And the reception you get is terrible, which means your confidence goes right downhill, and the Itty Bitty Shitty Committee pops up and says, you suck, which is not what we want for our awesome practitioners.
No,
Yeah.
not at all. So, I mean, it is a big journey for people that haven't done sales before.
Sure.
Moving from the Itty Bitty Shitty Committee, lots to remember. It's quite overwhelming. There's lots of steps to it. You've got to make sure you got all the pieces in place and your scripts in place, etc. And you're comfortable and confident doing that. Mm-hmm. How do you know you get it right? Now, you talked about some telltale signs already that I picked up on. One of them was the conversation's no longer driven by price. And I thought, that's good. If I'm not having a conversation that's driven by price, then I'm on the right track. Mm-hmm. And I know for me, as I say, there's almost like a feeling, a sensation, an energy or a tension when you're in that space and you know that they're interested. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you could say, these are telltale signs to look out for, that you're on the right track? These are the breadcrumbs.
Yeah, look, I think it's almost one step before that, Andrew. I talk about a principle in my book, Confident Closing, which we'll talk about how the listeners can get access to that. And the principle is interested versus interesting. I think there's a lot of people out there that are trying really hard to be interesting to people rather than getting interested in what they need. And so, the scripts that we have and what we nurture our clients to understand in terms of how do I present myself with congruence and integrity and, do it in a way that represents everything I want to embody as a healer or a practitioner, but also, get through to people. That comes after you get interested in the person. So you really want to be able to ask some good quality questions of people and get interested in, what do they know about what it is that you're doing? What do they need? Where's the challenges in, the areas that, they're attempting to strive for? And, one of the key things that we definitely don't have enough time to talk about today is, the importance of a niche. I think sometimes because these modalities, particularly NLP, kinesiology, things like matrix therapies, stuff like hypnosis, what are some of the other modalities? Reiki, Huna. I'm also an initiator in Huna. A lot of these different practices, they often are so broad in terms of the problems that people can solve with them. And so one of the challenges that the practitioners have when they first get out there is it's kind of like, I can help everybody with everything. And, you just come and see me and I'll fix you right up, which for starters, I don't necessarily agree with the idea that people are broken. I think no one needs fixing. Everyone can always use with a few tweaks or a little bit of, add-ons and, improvements and efficiencies and things like that. But I don't think anybody's broken. They just have inefficient strategies. And the next thing is that, no one really understands that they need you and why they need you. So I think the key thing, the telltale signs that you need to look out for is if someone's eyes are glazing over while you talk about the million different modalities that you're certified in and, the different techniques. We used to have a joke amongst the NLP trainers that, they would go and sell the jargon of NLP. And for anyone who knows NLP, it's extremely jargonistic. And I remember when I first got out as a brand new practitioner, a brand new trainer, I'd go to networking events and I'd say to people, so what do you do? And then they'd ask me and I'd say, I'm a trainer of NLP. And they'd say, that's interesting. And I said, you've heard of NLP, have you? Because at the time it wasn't as widely known as it is now. And they'd go, no. And then the huge halt in the conversation would happen and I'd realize that I'd embarrass the person, but people don't generally like to say that they don't know what you're talking about. So you're better off simplifying it. And if a 7-year-old can't understand what you're talking about, then it's too complicated.
Nice, great advice. And I don't think the power of niching can be underestimated.
Yeah, and that's a whole other webinar in itself.
Isn't it? We'll have to come back for round 2 on that one.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's also one of those lessons that business owners just resist over and over and over again.
Oh, it's the fear of missing out. What if I get a client that's not in my niche? I might want to help them.
Then serve them, right? Your target's not your market.
Yeah, that's
you can
right.
serve people that come to you outside your target niche.
Yeah, you're just not targeting them. That's exactly right. And that's what they miss. But it's the fear of, oh my God, then I won't have variety in my clients.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I know from firsthand experience, when you try to be all things to all people, you end up being nothing to nobody.
That's exactly right. And never a truer word spoken about that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Chandell. I think that's probably time for this evening. Is there anything else you wanted to leave us with? I know you've got a wonderful gift that we can tap into. Yeah.
Well, I'll just tell the guys about that. So, as you know, I'm the author of Confident Closing: Sales Secrets That Grew a Business by 400% in 6 months, and how they can work for you. And so, I wanted to extend a gift with some tools that you can get started with right now. So, I think Andrew will put in the show notes. It's lifepuzzle.com.au/book bonus. If you go there and log in for the tool, you'll have a little tool that you can use to define your ideal client avatar and start getting a bit clearer on your niche. I introduce a concept called the elevator pitch, which is how we make sure that we are communicating what we do with value. In tribute to my beautiful mum, who was the co-founder of our business, Teresa, who was an amazing hypnotherapist, we've got one of her amazing guided meditations called Quiet the Mind Meditation. It's a beautiful guided meditation. Please don't drive while listening to it. I want you to sit in a comfortable, safe place and listen to it while there's no distractions whatsoever, and really enjoy that. And of course, there is an audio copy of my book, Confident Closing, which you can listen to either by the chapters that you are interested in. It's written in a way that there is a story that follows through if you want to read it cover to cover. But if you see a chapter that's interesting to you, then you can go right to that chapter and have a look. And particularly, we've got one there about the Itty Bitty Shitty Committee and value perceptions and money, which I think are really important topics for our heart-centered practitioners who have a goal to serve.
Beautiful. Amazing. And that is a really fantastic book. I've read it myself. So Thank you for being so generous, and thank you again for all your wisdom and insight this evening.
I really appreciate it, and I really welcome anybody to reach out and get in touch. If you have any questions specifically, then you can reach me through lifepuzzle.com.au. We've got our contact details there, and on a weekly basis, we do Monday motivation and Friday challenges. So if you're interested in getting some insights, I share them twice a week. So feel free to join us on that channel as well.
Amazing. Thanks, Chandell. We'll put those in the show notes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, and I wish you every success. Go out there and be you, and really embody and share those gifts that you have, because everybody has something really special to share, and the world needs to hear it. But if you don't communicate it, then no one will ever know.
Amazing. Thanks, Chandell.
Thanks, Andrew. See you later.
And there we have it. Wasn't that cool? There's lots there to unpack, and I'm sure we'll have to get Chandell back for a round 2 at some point so we can, go into niching, and I'm sure there's lots of other things that we could explore. So tell us what you think. Hit us up in the comments, and if you've got any questions for Chandell, let us know down there as well, and we can follow up with her. I'm sure she'll follow along in the comments feed. And tell me, what was your best takeaway, the most valuable thing that you got out of the session this evening? And do check out those gifts. Those are wonderfully generous, and I'm looking forward to downloading the meditation and having a listen to that one myself. All right, that's all we have for you this evening. So we'll have another podcast coming up shortly. Until then, may you always be confident in your closing. I'll talk to you soon. See you guys.
That was the Heal and Transform podcast with Andrew Ramsden. If you enjoyed the episode or found it valuable, ask yourself, who else do you know who would benefit from it? Pass it on or send them to healandtransform.org/podcast. And until next time, remember, to make a bigger positive impact, we need to leverage ourselves, tap into the right technology, and collaborate, because we can only heal and transform the world together.